This is Howard Hamilton, founder of Soccermetrics Research. Welcome to Integral Magazine's exclusive interview with the proprietor of the Football Mythbusters blog, Murray Innes. Murray, it's great to finally talk to you. How are things going?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks. It's good to finally talk as well.
Great. I understand you're in a warm, sunny place known for champagne football at the moment.
Yes, I've just moved to Barcelona, so from Scotland, so it's quite a shock to the system with the weather.
Yeah, that and other things as well, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I went to the Barcelona game last week and it was 8-0, so it was a good match to pick.
Yeah, that's a good one. Lots of scoring.
Yeah.
I don't think that will let off during the La Liga season, though.
No, I don't think so. I think they'll be back to their best this season.
Great. So I'd like to talk to you in this interview about soccer analytics and your work with Football Mythbusters. And one thing that I've learned since I got involved in soccer analytics is that a lot of people come to the field from various directions. So I'll ask you, what's your day job?
At the minute, I'm unemployed.
Okay,
Um,
what do you do by training, I should say?
well, I graduated in computing science, so I'm computing technical background. That was my I knew how to make websites, so it was the website. I knew how to make the website first before the analysis and the research and that kind of stuff.
Okay. So what motivated you to start Football Mythbusters?
Commentators, basically, um, the bad ones anyway. The constant hearing of cliches, and it, sometimes it can really annoy you when commentators say something that you or you believe is not true, or you know is not true. So I thought I'd really like to find out which ones are true, which ones are the
Yeah,
cliches.
yeah, I've been hearing that a lot, that there's a real opportunity to develop analytics to counter some of the things that are being said on television by pundits, whether former players or coaches or journalists or what have you. So it's interesting
Okay.
to see that you came from that direction.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I've been poking through your site at footballmythbusters.com, and it's really good stuff. How long has Football Mythbusters been around?
Since the start of May,
Okay.
so not very long, but I haven't wrote any articles for the past I think 4 weeks now because I've been developing a database because the turnaround on articles was quite long, especially if I'm working. It takes over 40 to 50 hours to write one article, including all the research. So um, database should start to maybe 1 or 2 hours hopefully, and that'll be I'll be able to write articles far more frequently.
Okay. And I apologize to those who are listening. Murray has some bandwidth issues in Barcelona. He's in a temporary place right now, so if it drops in and out, we apologize for that. Um, yeah, so how do you decide which myths to investigate?
Well, the very first thing I did was just write out all the myths that I knew of, that I could think of from the top of my head, and then I used my friends. Like I have a lot of football fanatic friends, so I used them to find out which one was the one that we all knew, the most common one, and decided just to pick the most commonly perpetrated one, which happened to be 2-0 as a dangerous scoreline. I think like most people in football knew that one.
Right. So how do you collect your data?
Um, well, first of all, because of the nature of the articles, I have to decide on my data requirements first. So I have specific data requirements for every article. So the method will be different every time. But for 2-0 is a dangerous scoreline, I wrote out what I thought would be relevant data. So matches where 2-0 occurred. And so went through all the previous seasons of English Premier League and just copied all the matches where 2-0 occurred and then proceeded to get that even further based on time and whether it was like if it was 2-0 in the 90th minute and there was no point, it doesn't really provide any useful information. So the first thing is just to I copy and paste manually, so the research takes quite a long time.
Yes, I feel your pain on that one
Yeah,
all too well.
yeah,
Yeah, that's motivated us to develop a lot of software and tools to automate that process. Um, so,
yeah.
which data are most important to you, and which ones are not so important or downright misleading?
I think that I don't really deal with like the more specific data. So there's a lot of really good analysts on Twitter now that in their spare time will do analytics on certain players. So target, um, chances created and stuff like that. And I don't really, that doesn't really come up a lot in cliches. It might in the future, but right now it doesn't really occur. So I more concentrate on match results, score lines, at what times of goals. Like the next myth I'd like to do is half time the worst time to concede. So just before half time. So I will need to find matches where the team conceded right before half time. And so time of goals, and my data is very broad, very it's not very detailed. So I don't really need the the far more specific data.
Okay, how sophisticated are the statistical analyses that you perform? Because you're talking a lot about busting myths or confirming myths. So
Yeah,
I was kind of curious about that.
they're not they're not sophisticated at the minute at all. That was one of the very first constructive feedback I got was that they were interesting articles, but they didn't say a lot at the start. So I enrolled in an online course at Fairplay for statistics, so that will improve definitely because I didn't come from a statistical background. I'm just an avid football fan that knew how to start a website and could write an article. So statistics is definitely the thing I need to improve on. The analysis, definitely. So it's not very sophisticated. It's more common sense conclusions that you can draw from the data, but they're not foolproof. They don't confirm anything at the minute. I need to back that up with more sophisticated analysis to make it more concrete.
That's true, but I think a nice thing about making common sense inferences from data is that it motivates you to ask more questions, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. The when I was posting like advertising a couple of the articles to get feedback, that was always the the conversation generated was always more questions. What else can we find out about these myths? What other data can we use? Um, what else does the data that I found collated tell me or tell us as football fans? So it definitely the by trying to keep it simple, I think is it's the most interesting way to do it as well.
What's the biggest challenge to performing the types of investigations that you do?
The minute it's the data collation, so it's getting the data and collecting it, basically trying to collect enough data to make a reasonable um, conclusion. But I think deciding what data is relevant as well is a big challenge. So once I have my data, seeing if the data I have actually says anything about the myth. Sometimes there are bits of data that I have collected, but afterwards I've realised that they don't actually say anything about the myth. So removing data that takes hours of work to collect is sometimes a hard decision to make, but sometimes I've had to do that.
Right. Okay. This is Howard Hamilton of Soccermetrics, and I'm here with Murray Innes of Football Mythbusters for Integral Magazine. Murray, let's talk about some specific projects that you've done. I think your first project was on whether 2-0 was really the most dangerous scoreline in football. Tell me more about that.
Well, that's a myth that was the first myth that popped into my head. Basically, it's a myth I've always heard, been told by commentators, by football coaches. I think it's very popular in like high school football coaches. Once you get to 2-0, it's a motivating tool to try and keep players playing. And I think it I think it's a interesting myth to do because it kind of makes sense. 2-0 could be a dangerous scoreline because your players might get more relaxed and as opposed to 1-0 where they might be more vigilant and be less prone to mistakes at 2-0 and get relaxed and let the team in. So it makes a little bit of sense, but not enough that I was convinced by it. So that's why I chose to investigate that one first. And that was the very first one I did, so it took a long time, but and it was only one season of the Premier League that I managed to look at because I just had no website or anything at that point. It was just a proof of concept article that I'd like to revisit later with far more data.
Okay. You also had an interesting project on the performance of new managers, and you ended up confirming and busting a couple of myths. Can you discuss that?
Yeah, well, I think I busted the myth that the new managers always win their first games, which is a very popular. I think it's more popular among betting people, tipsters. That would if a new manager's coming into his new game, they always get that new manager buzz, and they'll win their first game. Which I think that it's a very difficult. So obviously, if you think about it for more than a few minutes, you'll realise that it completely depends on the situation. If the new manager of Swansea is playing Manchester United for his first game, then that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to win. He's probably going to lose that game. So there's a lot of factors around that, especially the form of the team, at what stage the manager's coming in. He's coming in at pre-season level, then he has obviously many weeks to work with the team as opposed to 1 week or 2 weeks. I thought that was pretty self-explanatory that new managers didn't always win. The the other part of the article was the upswing in form that new managers get, and I think maybe not confirmed it, but certainly shown that most managers in the English leagues in the past few seasons have had brought with them an upswing in form from the previous managers when they took over the position.
Right. There's some research that I've seen that shows that yes, there is an upswing in performance, but it doesn't last very long with new managers. So I think it would be really cool to see
Yeah,
how those managers perform longer term.
yeah. Well, I took the very basic cut off that it was. I would compare the last 5 games of the previous manager to the first 5 games of the new manager. So it was very simplistic, but it showed that there is a definite reason to maybe sack your man, not sack your manager, but a new manager does bring in a reinvigoration for the players.
Right. Were there any myths that you investigated that you were surprised had some basis in fact?
Um, I'm not really sure if I think the informed team, they always win the playoff was an interesting one. Um, the end result was that they don't always win the playoff, which is something that I would have probably not bet because I think that you always think the team with the most momentum going into the playoffs at the end of the season is the team that you would back to win. But I think you come up with there was quite a few situations like only one team in the championship in the past 30 seasons that were in form actually won the playoff, which was quite surprising. And I think the European hangover as well was definitely something I didn't expect. According to my very simplistic research in the past 10 seasons, um, the, the European hangover doesn't exist. It has no effect on teams' league form.
I think what I was surprised with when I took a look at your work on informed teams in the playoffs was that the team ranked highest heading into the playoff more often than not won it. And you would think that because of the randomizing nature of the playoffs, that every team, whether third through sixth or whatever place they were in, had an equal chance of winning. So to see that the highest ranked team in the regular season more often than not won the playoffs was really surprising to me.
Yeah, the I think the playoffs in the English league, I think they're generally quite predictable. Apart from the informed bit, I think that the it does seem to be that the team with the most points will get promoted on most occasions. But as I saw from that, one thing I like to do when I'm researching these articles is to find bits of information that are surprising, so or quirks of data. So I think on that one it was that on one season the team with the lowest points total by quite some distance, I think it was 12 points, and they had the worst form in the 5 games running in. They that was the team that got promoted. I think it was Scunthorpe United one season, were just the worst team out of the four in every way possible, and they managed to get promoted.
Do you know what happened to them the following season? Did they get relegated right away, or
I think it was a straight relegation. Yeah,
yeah,
I think so.
it's not too surprising. Um,
No.
has your blog changed the way that you watch a football match?
Um, well, I usually try. I usually watch. I support Liverpool, so when I'm watching Liverpool, it doesn't change at all. It's always emotional. I don't really care what's happening tactics wise or what the commentators are saying. I'm just really want Liverpool to win. But um, sometimes when I'm watching other games, yeah, I listen out for the commentators now and try and keep a cliche count of how many cliches I can find to because I keep a list of cliches that I want to eventually bust or tackle. So I'm always listening for more and more to add to that list.
Do you think analytics can make football better or more attractive, or is or are things incomplete there? Is the jury still on that one?
I think in recent years it probably has I think from a managing perspective. I think clubs have put analytics to very good use within the clubs themselves, using GPS systems in training and statistics to determine what position players play. And I think managers, especially new managers, are putting more stock in analytics as opposed to just the gut feeling of a scout or their gut feeling of whether a player will do well. So I think it already is making football more interesting, definitely.
Okay. Are there any questions that you would like to see considered, whether by you or anyone else?
I think from a myth perspective, I'd really like to find out if Barcelona could do it in a wet, windy night in Stoke. I think that was a famous line by Andy Gray about Lionel Messi, and I've tried to come up with a list of data requirements for it, but getting historical weather and for certain matches, it's a very difficult list to tackle. So hopefully one day we'll find out if they can.
Could you repeat that question again? I'm sorry, I
So
missed it.
it was the when Andy Gray said he wondered if Barcelona could do it in a wet, windy night in Stoke.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I've heard that cliche a number of times. It's
Yeah,
one thing, it's one thing for a team that plays attractive football to do it at home. It's another thing to do it on cold winter nights,
yeah,
at some northern England place.
yeah. I think they'd manage it, but I'd really like to find out what would happen in that situation.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could look at how they perform um, against lower tier teams in La Liga who are trying to get a result or at least hold them to a draw and
Yeah,
disrupt matches. They've struggled quite a few times against lower tier teams.
yeah. The first thing I actually looked at was there's a good website that provides um, like styles of play, and so I looked for teams in the La Liga that played the long ball. That was my first port of call, just find the teams that play the long ball, and then I was trying to find weather, historical weather, to see what nights Barcelona played them, that it was wet and wet or windy, and it was it was going to take me a very long time though, much more time than I really have. It would have been up in the 100 hours mark, so I felt I'd leave that for a day when I can maybe get the data far more easily.
Okay. I was about to ask you if you have a favorite team, but you just said Liverpool. Do
Yeah.
you have any in Scotland or anywhere else?
No, just Liverpool. Like
Right.
I watch other teams, but I don't support any other teams. If a team's playing well, like I like to watch Borussia Dortmund, but I wouldn't say I support them in any way. They just play really good football. They play really nice football, and it's still a good team to watch. They're very entertaining, but the only team I support is Liverpool.
Right. So, what were your thoughts on last season's Premier League? Um, I know that you have a number of perspectives being a Liverpool supporter, but I would imagine that not many people expected a comfortable stroll for Manchester United.
No, I didn't expect Manchester United to win the league. No, I thought Man City would have won it again because on paper I think they've got the best squad, and I think they do again this season. I think they have the best squad by far, and I thought that I didn't see any reason why they couldn't go on and win it again, or not at least fight for it or challenge for it. I didn't expect Man United to stroll to the title with what I thought was quite a weak squad for for Man United standards.
Right. So, were there any surprises from last season in England or in Europe?
I think Swansea were the best surprise. I think not everyone wasn't sure. Well, Laudrup came with a good record, but Premier League's always very difficult, and I think he was played really entertaining football and obviously won the cup. So I think they were the best surprise, and I think they'll have another good season this season.
Okay. From a Liverpool perspective, what was the biggest surprise? Was the biggest surprise there?
Um, Coutinho, I think how good Coutinho was. He he came. We thought it was a good. And from what I knew of him, he was very highly rated a few years ago, but had a bad spell at Inter Milan. But he's definitely one of our best players by far, and I really hope he stays.
Yeah. I've always wanted to ask this question of a Liverpool supporter. Um, what what's the perspective of Liverpool fans toward Everton? Because I know it's not the typical kind of rivalry that you would have between,
Yeah,
say, Celtic and Rangers or Real Madrid or Barcelona, but there is a rivalry there. It's more of a sporting rivalry.
yeah.
Um,
I think it's friendly because it's not friendly, but it's family. So the same families support the same teams because they're so close. Like everyone in that area will support Liverpool or Everton, and it usually divides families. So you don't fall out with your family over football. So it's always a more good natured rivalry. Well, it was a few years ago. I don't know how much that continues now, but
and what were Liverpool supporters' impressions of David Moyes? Did they see him staying there for a long time, or perhaps moving on to a bigger club, or what?
um, I think they I think they probably expected him to leave quite eventually. I think he's a good manager. I think it'll be interesting to see what he can do with a better squad. And I think he deserves the opportunity. I think he is. I think he'll do well at Manchester United. And I think he probably felt his time had come at Everton. He'd been there for over a decade, I think, and I think he performed as well as he could have at Everton, and achieved what he probably achieved, reached his ceiling of achievement. Yeah.
Okay. So, what do you think will be the major storylines this coming season?
Um, well, I think the title's a three horse race. So I think Manchester United, Man City, and Chelsea are the only teams really going to compete for that. I think Suarez will probably do something stupid again. I'm sure he'll want to leave in January. That'll be one of the two. Um, I think Swansea will be. I think Swansea will be the best surprise package. I think they've made some really good signings. I think they'll be competing for. If we don't push for the Champions League place, they'll be competing with us for the Europa League place.
So, do you think Suarez will leave?
I don't think he'll leave now. Not in this transfer window. I think there's a good chance he'll leave in January. And if we don't make Champions League, I think he'll definitely be gone next summer.
Okay. And do you think that Gareth Bale will leave Tottenham?
I'm not really sure. I don't. I think if they offer enough money, if they offer 100 million, I can't see why they would turn that down.
right? I mean,
I think he's a good player, but I don't think he's worth that.
I mean, that's true, but that doesn't stop Real Madrid from splashing out huge amounts of cash for
Yeah,
players. I mean, you're in Spain right now. I mean, you're hearing the. I don't know if you know Spanish, but you you're obviously hearing the press from Spain. I know in Barcelona it's different.
yeah. They don't really talk about Real Madrid much here, but there are still a few Madrid fans, obviously, and I think they want him, but just not that much that they want the team to pay 100 million for him. I think they'd happily pay about 70 million. I think that's probably the a rate that well everyone should be happy, but I don't think Tottenham would be happy with that.
Okay. All right. So now it's time to put your head on the block. Who do you think will be relegated from the Premier League? Who will finish in the top four? And who will end up winning the league?
Um, I think the top four will be Chelsea, Man City, Man United, and Tottenham. And I think Man City will win the league. I think Pellegrini's a great manager, and I think he's got a really, really good squad to choose from. As for relegation, I'm not really sure. I think the teams that come up are always usually the favourites to go down. I think I think Stoke are probably a team that I would pick to go down. I don't think Mark Hughes is a very good manager, and I think they'll struggle this season. I think Crystal Palace will struggle as well. And I think it's a toss up between Hull and Cardiff and the other promoted teams, and Newcastle if they don't manage to change their ways of last season.
Yeah, that seems like an interesting myth to investigate right there. Do promoted sides get relegated immediately?
Yeah, I think that's one I'll need to add to the list.
Yeah, so there's another idea for you. All right, so that's all the time we have for this interview today. Again, my guest has been Murray Innes of Football Insiders. And Murray, where can people find you?
At www.footballmythbusters.com or on Twitter at FBMythbusters.
Great. All right, Murray, thank you so much for an excellent interview.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, this has been Howard Hamilton of Soccermetrics Research. Thanks for watching.